Okay. One more minute.
Hello, and we're live. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to this two-event celebration. No, we are streamed live on the YouTube channel of the Asian Center. So please share. Salamat po sa pagsama sa amin. This afternoon, we are celebrating the first art exhibit of my good friend Lan Mercado, whose pen and ink artworks are used in the special edition of the book The Battle of Marawi, authored by Criselda Yabes, which we are also relaunching this afternoon. This event is sponsored by the UP Asian Center, and we want to thank Dean Nenelito Sevilla Jr., Professor Tonet Traquisa, Janus Nolasco, and Danay Pantano. We would also like to thank June Sepe and Jonathan Celiona of ABS-CBN News for the photographs that we used in the video for today's program. Salamat din sa dakila at sa aktivista sa pag-assist sa creative component ng launching. And to welcome us and formally open the program, let us hear from the Dean of Asian Center, Dean Enelito Sevilla Jr. Si Dean Sevilla po ay nanggaling rin sa Mindanao. He obtained his BS International Relations from the Mindanao State University in Marawi City. He has a master's degree in international relations from the University of Shahid Beheshti in Iran and earned his PhD in international relations from the University of Tehran. He is an expert on Mindanao, the relationship between the Philippines and the Middle East, among others. So let's hear it from Dean Enelito Sevilla Jr.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Joel Saracho. Good afternoon, everyone. Maayong adlaw sa inyong tanan. Mapia ikagabi, Ricano Langon, mga laksakan, mga pagariakan. Paninta ko ala mapipia ginawa tano langon sa giya na pandemic. I hope that all are safe, staying productive, and adapting well to what is becoming the new normal brought upon us by COVID-19 pandemic. We have had to shift to online platforms in order to continue our activities aimed at enriching our knowledge on and broaden our experience of the Philippines and Asia. We are launching today the special edition of the book written by veteran journalist Criselda Yabes, and an art exhibit by artist and development expert Lan Mercado, simply entitled The Battle of Marawi. The book provides a blow-by-blow account of the siege and battle that began in the late May 2017 and ended 5 months after in October. The book recounts how the war unfolded to become the longest and the biggest episode in the country's history of violent extremism and urban warfare. By giving us a blow-by-blow account of soldiers in the front line, we see the dedication of the men in uniform and the tenacity of the jihadis, the weakness of a purely military campaign in an urban setting, and the need to rethink government approach to anti-terrorism into incorporating cultural and socio-economic dimension. I must admit, at another level, today's activity also has some special meaning for me. I was educated, as mentioned by the moderator or the MC, the Master of Ceremony, in Mindanao State University main campus, Marawi City, and my experience living in the campus has been very productive, not only because I earned a university degree, but most especially because I was fortunate to have the opportunity to learn about the Maranao culture and understand their way of life. As I spent 4 years and a half of my university education at MSU Marawi main campus, I had the privilege to make a lot of friends with the people of Marawi, and I could say that MSU, or Marawi in general, is my second hometown. Until today, I maintain good relations with many of my Maranao brothers and sisters. The Maranaos are a people with high regard to Islamic religion. I have known them to be industrious, highly educated, innovative, and friendly people. They are also one of the most artistic and culturally creative people in Mindanao. A town adjacent to Marawi City, a town called Tugaya, is considered to be the center of this Maranao artisan and arts and cultural production over many decades. And Marawi City served as the melting pot of trade and commerce, arts and culture, as well as educational and innovative activities within the province of Lanao del Sur. This history and character of Marawi, once the biggest Muslim-dominated city in the region, makes the Marawi siege and ensuing war all the more tragic. On this day, October 19, we commemorate the end of the war, almost 4 years ago today. By the way of the book launch and art exhibit, we want to draw attention to the continuing struggle of the Marawi residents to rebuild their city and their lives. To end, let me welcome you once again to the launching of the special edition of the book, The Battle of Marawi, and art exhibit. I also would like to congratulate the author, Ms. Criselda Yabes, and artist, Lan Mercado. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Magandang hapon and thank you very much.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much, Dean Sevilla. Now, huwag na natin itong patagalin. Let's meet. It's time to meet and hear from them. The two women who made today's event possible. Criselda Yabes is an award-winning author and journalist who has published 10 books, the latest of which is The Battle of Marawi. Cris has worked as an international correspondent for the Associated Press, Newsweek, Reuters, Washington Post, and The Economist, covering insurgencies, rebellion, coup d'etat in the Philippines, as well as war and crisis across the region. Across the globe. In 2012, she received the National Book Award for her nonfiction work, Peace Warriors, regarding military affairs in Muslim Mindanao. The artist, Lan Mercado, is an activist, development, and humanitarian worker who has a solid 30 years of experience in humanitarian work, civil society, coalitions, environmental movements, and women's organizations. She was the Asia Regional Director for Oxfam, and until recently, when she decided to pause and change gears to pursue her art. The 9 pen and ink works that will be featured today mark her very first show. Lan is auctioning the artworks. I-auction po yung mga artworks, and mapagbebentahan ito, the proceeds will go to the livelihood of the women of Marawi and Baygani, a group she belongs to that supports EJK widows and orphans. Okay, we will announce the details of the auction as we go along in the program. Okay, so magandang hapon, Lan. Magandang hapon, Chris.
Good afternoon.
Congratulations for this launch. Grabe. Kakatawa.
Magandang hapon, Joel, Chris, at saka sa mga nag-participate sa launch na ito. Medyo kinakabahan ako kasi may 100 na participants and I'm not done
Exactly
this before.
100. It struck 100 just now.
Congratulations. Chris, unahin natin yung book. What does it mean when you say this is a special edition?
Well, it's okay. In simple terms, it's special because you have Lan's artworks and you have Joma's maps. But the book essentially was first published last year.
Mhm.
And it was a much smaller book and very simple. We did it in the middle of a pandemic, kaya nilabas na lang namin as simple as possible. And then one day, our common friend namin ni Lan, si Oka Gomez, also from Mascom, showed me a pen and ink drawing that Lan did of the White Mosque. And I was just floored. I was really awed by it. So sabi ko, what if we do something different, like put more drawings instead of photographs? Because I felt that there were many good photographs of Marawi, admittedly. But I felt that at some point it was too saturated na. Yung artwork ni Lan, it was kind of like soothing, it offset the violence in the story. So, and I asked her if she wanted to do it, and she said, yeah, she was willing to do it. And that's it. That's how it started. And then my next step was to look for a map maker para may balance yung dalawa, because I knew of readers who would, while reading the book, check Google Map to see how the soldiers were doing all their maneuvers. And so I said, with the map there, they don't have to do it. So tamang-tama, the story, the scene, the atmosphere of Marawi, and plus the map itself. Giving the readers details of what really went on during those 5 months. So, but how Lan did it is another story.
Which is the next question. How did you do it? Lan.
Sorry, Joel. Can you say that again? I'm having trouble with the audio.
Ayun. Yung sinasabi kasi ni Chris, nakita niya yung works tapos nag-usap kayo. So it means that these 9 works were made specifically for the book. Paano yung prosesong dinaanan mo sa pagpili ng subject, sa pagre-render? The next question. How did you
Actually, nagsimula ako sa pagbasa ng libro. In fact, the very first drawing was very simple and stark, medyo may pagka-sketchy. Pero nung nabasa ko na yung libro in full, binago ko yung style kasi na-engross na ako dun sa narrative. And Chris was such a good storyteller. Na nakaka-capture ka talaga ng story ng battle and how it unfolds. Pero because I also have a humanitarian background, I worked in conflict-affected areas in central Mindanao for more than 10 years. And in fact, one of the drawings that I was doing happened at the time when I was also doing the rescue of civilians from Afghanistan. So naghahalo-halo yung stimulus sa akin. No? So if you're asking about the process, I was really capturing the details of each scene and trying to illustrate not just the images, not just the structure, but the details of how life is affected, demolished, ruined by violent conflicts such as the one that we've been experiencing in Mindanao and in many other areas across the world.
Okay, and we will see those details pag pinakita natin yung mga artworks mamaya with the reading of excerpts from the book. Yung isa pang special feature nitong bagong edition, tong special edition, are the maps. No? I would like to call on Joma Ramos. Can you join us, Joma, and tell us paano yung naging paggawa mo ng map? Bakit nyo ito naisipan? Tapos paano siya ni-render?
Hi. Good afternoon to everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So Chris reached out to me around, I think, when was it? April of last year. So I was fresh out of a job from IBM. I was in corporate for the longest time. And of course, I'm no stranger to Chris's work because I read Boys from the Barracks, would you believe, several years ago. I was previously a Philippine Military Academy cadet myself. I got discharged because of my eyes. And I guess the military interest just stuck with me. So I befriended Chris in FB, and I think she saw one of my artworks and she kind of messaged me, would you wish to do the maps for this book that I have right now? And she sent over to me a copy of the book, which I studied. I think I produced around 20 maps or so. I read the book, of course, from cover to cover. It wasn't really hard to get the view of what needs to be illustrated because Chris, as an author, is very descriptive. As Lana's mentioned, the flow of the manuscript or the flow of the book is great. We can easily visualize what she wanted to show or what she wanted to present. But also, of course, on top of that, Chris also has numerous contacts, which the book led to, like contacts in the military, right? And she would also show me maps that were provided by the officers themselves who fought during the conflict. So for me, it's just a combination of reading the book through and through, of course, looking at the maps that's provided by Chris. We tried to be as accurate as possible. We looked at existing maps of the area that's available online or that's available in print, right? And of course, we cross-referenced it with the maps provided by the officers themselves. It was the pandemic, so Chris and I really can't meet face-to-face that much. I think in the entire course of creating these maps, we met around 2 or 3 times at the most. But we were able to communicate online quite very well. And we would send each other numerous messages because I needed to clarify, do you think this is Basak Malutlut? Or do you think this is the location of the Kilala Regiment or the Kilala Detachment, etc.? Okay, and she would correct me if my placements of landmarks, units, etc. were incorrect. So it was a great collaboration between both of us, essentially. And it's made easier by the fact that the book is very well written and it's very clear. Thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Joma. Importante kasi po yung mapa, no? Especially the one that you see on your screen right now, to situate, to give us a geographic context kung saan nangyari yung mga insidente, yung mga barilan noon sa Marawi. Parang nagbasa ng 100 Years of Solitude, tapos binabalikan mo yung family tree ng mga ng family. Thank you, Joma.
Thank you.
Hindi lang siguro yung lugar, no? Even the date of the launch, I don't think this is quite coincidental because it was around this time 4 years ago when the Battle of Marawi ended. Tama ba ako, Chris?
Yeah, it was around that time. Actually, Hapilon and Omar were killed in the very early morning of October 16. but there were still some remnants of the jihadis, and they all gathered in a place called Tenten, which is like as they called it, a center by the lake. And that's basically where the last event happened.
Okay.
Sa 19. Pero meron pa rin mga konting, shots after that. And one officer said that the very, very final shot daw was on November. But the 19 was kind of like the day that, that marked the end of it all nung nag-surrender na yung mga rebels. The remnants, yung mga remainders, yeah.
Okay, so I think it's time now to show the artworks and read some excerpts from the book. No, ganito po yung gagawin natin. We'll show you where some of the events actually happened through the map na prepare ni Joma, and we also have an interactive map using to situate ano yung mga pinag-uusapang lugar. And then we'll show you the art piece as interpreted by Lan, and with it, we'll read excerpts from the book. So simulan ko. I'll read the first excerpt, and it's about Moncado Hill. Moncado Hill is an abandoned viewpoint overlooking Dansalan. It was now the gathering pool of the Scout Rangers units. This early in the fight, Hunter couldn't yet make a move to stop on Moncado Hill, staying put in an abandoned structure, which was somewhat neoclassic with arched windows on the facade. The old city hall stood like a haunted villa on a citadel. The soldiers turned it into a barracks, covering up the bare windows with plywood, torn cloth, plastic sheets, and laminated sacks. The Philippine flag fluttered above the building. Raptor was ordered to join the chopper lift with Hunter's 2nd Battalion over the breadth of the city and onto Moncado Hill, where the atmosphere among the senior commanders appeared to be getting tense. They were burdened by the pressure from top officials to get going, to stop the rebels from taking full control of the city. Was it going to be bugas-bugas, slow and deliberate, or was it going to be fast and frontal? How will they set a balance between the two? For Raptor, the pressure bore down mostly on the company commanders. 8 out of the regiment's 15 were there. Okay. Chris, there were mentions of Raptor and Hunter. Sino sila? Ano sila? And how important are they to Moncado?
Are they? Si Hunter is the battalion commander, and Raptor is under him. He's a subordinate. He's the company commander. So they went to Moncado Hill, which is in the southern portion of the city. And if you're going down the lake, going down south, you would hit Butig. So if you're in Butig and going up to Marawi, you would go by Moncado Hill. So it's very important for them to be there because it was kind of like the gateway. There were very few forces there at that time, at the beginning. So they had to be sent there by helicopter. Talagang, pabalik-balik yung helicopter kasi if you're talking about one battalion, ang dami nun. That's 4 companies, and one company is like about around 50, 80 men. So how many soldiers can fit in one chopper? Na dalawa lang yung choppers. So anyway, they had to go there to make sure they secure the place, they keep the place. And there's something very forlorn about this area kasi nga there's just this abandoned structure which used to be the city hall, and it overlooks the city. And just down below is the Dansalan College, which the rebels had already occupied. And so they could really have a full view of what was happening in the city on the very first day, the first days of the siege. And I'm sure it must have been harrowing because nung pumunta ako doon after na the battle, I mean, nakita ko na yung sira, you know, yung destruction. What more nung nandun pa sa very first day na nakita mo, lumalabas lang yung mga rebels, kuha na nila yung Dansalan, umiikot-ikot lang sila, parang bahay nila. At wala silang magawa pa kasi hindi nila alam kung ano nangyayari. So that's what Moncado Hill was like, you know. It's kind of symbolic in the sense that they had to be there first and they had to figure out what to do next. And the first thing they had to do was to try to take Dansalan, and that's a huge thing to do because Dansalan is like a cocoon. You know, the campus was it's like an oasis in the entire city, but you cannot just like go in and attack the place kasi kung kahit na anong direction ang pupuntahin mo, mauunahan ka. You could be hit right away. So they really had to take time thinking of how to retake Dansalan.
And Moncado provided that.
Yes, it's on a hill, so titingin ka lang sa baba, nandun na siya.
Lan, ano yung tinry mong i-capture?
Bakit ko din drawing? Moncado Hill.
Yeah.
Kasi nung binabasa ko na yung libro, nung binabasa ko yung chapter around Moncado Hill, ang pakiramdam ko, yung mga sundalo were at a loss. Hindi nila alam paano gagawin itong battle na to. How will they retake Marawi from the Maute brothers who already have control of the city? Tapos nararamdaman ko yung pakiramdam nila Hunter na nakatayo lang sila dun sa Moncado Hill. Tinitingnan nila yung una nilang military target, which was Dansalan College, na na-turn na into a fortress. At pinag-iisipan nila, kasi scout rangers itong mga to, hindi naman sila sanay sa urban warfare. Tapos, ang predominant feeling ko nung dinodrawing ko yung Moncado Hill at nung ginawa nilang barracks, yung old City Hall, na ang ganda-ganda actually nung architecture niya.
Yeah.
Parang ang lungkot-lungkot ng trabaho nila. At saka parang they had a daunting challenge ahead of them. So yun, that was the emotion that I was trying to capture when I was drawing Moncado Hill.
So, syempre, nag-ipon na, nagpaplano na sila and getting ready for attack. And we repeatedly mentioned Dansalan College, which is the subject of the second artwork. So, so let's look at Dansalan College as interpreted by Lan.
May sasabihin yata si Chris.
Yeah.
Chris, sorry.
Sorry lang, just the thing about Dansalan, kasi Dansalan is the repository of all the documents of the Maranao history.
Oh.
So, nandun lahat. So, hindi lang siya ordinary na school. Nandun yung history, nandun yung heritage ng Maranao people.
Okay.
Kaya naginamit ng rebelde na parang command and control center nila. Yun ang una nilang kinuha.
So let's hear from DSWD Undersecretary Danilo Pamonag, who was formerly the commander of the Special Operations Command that leads all the elite units of the army. During the Battle of Marawi, he was the ground commander of the Joint Special Operation Task Force Trident. Today, pakinggan natin ang excerpt on Dansalan College, again, as interpreted visually by Lan.
Hunter, the 2nd Scout Ranger Battalion, stared at the school building that was supposed to be his objective. The campus of Dansalan College was said to be the first command and control quarters of the Maute brothers in what was once in the old quaint section of the city. It took him roughly 25 days to come up with an assault plan on Dansalan College. Finally, with the strength of 5 companies, they pushed and pushed until they broke the enemy line and made it inside the campus. In the first wave, Two of the companies surged frontally, while others took the rear. Two soldiers fell immediately, shot in the head by snipers. As the troops crossed the first layer of defense, taking the main building that was called the Laubak Hall, they were ready to cross or magbagbag, as Hunter described it. It was quick, bakbakan na naman, or non-stop fighting. The enemy was routed. After all was said and done, Hunter had 5 Kias and more than 30 wounded.
Chris, tinatanong ni Oka, lahat ba daw nung archives?
Oo, halos lahat. May iba yatang na-recover, pero halos lahat yata, oo.
Okay.
Pero
version-
meron yatang ibang documents na naidala na sa MSU eh. MSU kasi is on the northern side of the river. So the city is divided by the Agus River. The water flows into the lake. So you have the south side, that's where Dansalan is, which is where the old city was. And the MSU, Mindanao State University, is on the northern side of the city, across the river.
Yung paglipat ng mga archives, nag-start ba to during the battle or long before naisip na nila na ano?
I think long before, bit by bit yata dinadala na doon. Pero I think still may mga important papers pa rin na natira sa Dansalan. Kasi doon nag-research si Peter Going. I think he's an American. I hope I'm not mistaken. But he started the center there in Dansalan in the 1960s. So siya yung nag-collect, nag-curate lahat ng mga documents tungkol sa, not just about Maranao, but also about Mindanao. Kaya very critical rin yung the entire city itself is a heritage city. So, but the fact that, you kept the history, documents of a place it's very crucial. Diba kasi oral history tayo parate, di ba? Pero yon may mga documents siyang nakuha na kinolect niya, nilagay niya doon.
Landun sa drawing, it's destroyed. It's a building na nasira na tapos tumutubo na yung mga damo. Bakit again it's a very very sad, very anong tawag mo doon? It's a very dark interpretation of the building. Why is that?
Talagang madilim ang gera eh. At saka actually itong Dansalan College, ito yung dinodrawing ko while I was in the middle of rescuing people from Afghanistan. So I could draw parallelisms between the loss of the culture, lalo na repository nga ito ng lahat ng importanteng documents for Marawi City, for the Maranao culture. But also the access to education. But if you notice, I actually had several reference pictures for Dansalan College. Pero ito yung pinili ko kasi I also wanted to show na kahit even in the most hostile environments, may tumutubo eh. There's grass, there's weeds, there's vines. And also there are trees in this particular drawing. Yung mga matitibay na pundasyon ng pillar ng society, hindi naman yan totally kayang sirain ng kahit anong conflict, even violent conflict. And actually, these are the things that will persist. But they cannot persist on their own as well. Kailangang pagtulong-tulungan, kailangang bantayan, kailangang asikasuhin. But that was the kind of mood that I was in when I was drawing Dansalan College.
So kung may tumutubo pa, may pag-asa pa. Ano na nangyari in 4 years? Tinatanong ni Stephen Rood sa chat, nakapag-recover na ba ang Dansalan College?
Last kasi ako nandun was before the pandemic, and this was also early in 2019. Actually, yung drawing nila, yun na yun. Yun na yung itsura niya nung 2019 nung pumunta ako doon. But a friend of mine was there recently and nandun pa rin siya, parang nagmukhang ghost town. Ang talagang nawala na or na nagiba na talaga, halos hindi mo na ma-recognize yung old Dansalan, the old city itself. Kasi that's how Marawi started, right? In a city called Dansalan. So actually doon talaga yung battle, yung main battle. Doon lahat ng mga critical locations doon nangyari. So nandun yung Bato Mosque, nandun yung park, nandun yung market, nandun rin yung Tenten, lahat ng mga lugar na drawing nila, nandun siya. So yun halos, it's almost gone. You almost don't recognize it anymore. And it's flattened, whereas before it was like a hill, you go down, you know, women would go down either the concrete steps or the natural footsteps. And they would go to the market. But when we were there, wala na, it was all flat.
Thank you. We'd like to invite our audience, if you have questions or comments or you want some clarifications, paki-post lang po sa chat. We'll try to answer them as we go along. Subukan natin po kung meron pa tayong oras. Anyway, so kung meron nakaposition sila tapos nagsimula na yung battle, paano naka-move in the city? Paano yung operation sa ground? I'm referring to kasi di ba pag mga gera may mga sa mga pelikula ganun, may mga trenches, ganun, may mga sandbags. Meron din ganun.
Sa umpisa hindi. Kasi nga yung city is divided by the river, di ba? So yung unang dapat nilang i-attack na frontal is to cross the river. So they have to cross the bridge. Yes, there are 3 bridges, pero dalawa lang yung major bridges doon na maiksi lang, siguro 100-150 meters lang. Doon sila na stuck. I mean, it's like hitting a wall, you know. It was as if the rebels had put up a front line right there and then so that the soldiers wouldn't be able to come in, and they were stuck there. The rebels could not get through, and in fact, one of the biggest debacles happened there in the bridge called Mapandi, where 13 soldiers, Marines, were killed. And also on the other side of the bridge, you had the Light Reaction Regiment, and this is the elite force, the one that was really trained in urban warfare. They were able to get through, but they were told to move back again because the resistance was very strong on the side of the rebels. So they had to look for another way, and it's not trenches and it's not sandbags. Later na yun. Later na yung trenches tsaka yung sandbags. So nakahanap sila, nakaikot sila. Nakahanap sila. Magandang story ito, but I can't say everything. Right?
Just read the book, buy the book, and read the whole story.
So nakaikot sila at dun sila nagkaroon ng formation na i-trap yung rebels na papunta sa lake.
Okay.
So you're talking about the trench later on lang na nag-build ng trench. Yung mga sundalo kasi isang parte ng Dansalan nasira na nga talaga, rubble, at hindi na sila makakross. Kung makakross sila, pwede silang mamatay dahil sa mga snipers. So gumawa sila ng parang tunnel/trench para yun ang ginawa nilang supply line to go from one place to another.
Okay.
And this was the infantry. It was the infantry who did this, not the special units.
Okay. We'll have you, Sec Pamonag, again to read excerpt on the trench, no? And we'll show Lan's interpretation of the space. So can we have the artwork?
The 63rd Infantry Battalion left their mark in Marawi by erecting a great wall that was a trench corridor crossing a bare flat land within the sector. It was no higher than 5 feet and 4 inches and few meters wide, protected by sandbags, wires, and iron sheets. The trench would only make sense to soldiers who had been there. It simply meant they had a shortcut to get to houses that had to be taken, shielded from gunshots in an open space. They finished building the wall in a week's time by September 10, nearly a month since Jerusalem took over. This wall is a testament of the Filipino soldiers' courage and determination. This wall remained in ground zero long after the battle was over, serving as a memorial. For what it was worth, this wall of sandbags was a reminder that it had been useful in the battle as a supply line in the desert.
Okay. Lan, yung drawing, no? Nasa foreground yung trench, tapos nasa background yung puro mga bahay. Parang may dating na it went through the community. I don't know if that's how it is physically, pero malinaw yung connection nung trench at saka nung community. Bakit ito ganito?
By the time I got to reading this part of the book, medyo nagbago na yung tingin ko sa mga sundalo. That was a particular effect on me, no, na talagang kasi mostly yung mga accounts na nababasa natin tungkol sa mga sundalo may pagka-negative, no. And in fact, while the Battle of Marawi was raging, real time, marami sa accounts na nababasa natin, and even now, it was all about, bakit nasira ng todo yung Marawi, ano yung impact sa mga civilians, at importante yon. Pero this particular drawing, gusto ko talaga, by the time I got to this part of the book, nararamdaman ko yung hirap ng battle for the soldiers who were on the ground. At saka by this time, nagmamount na yung casualties nila. And to me, when they built the trench, hindi lang naman silang may trench. Yung mga motive jihadis also had their tunnels that cut through houses. No? May very excellent description doon on how, gumagawa ng mga, binubutasan ng mga maute jihadis yung mga bahay so that they can shoot from those houses. And so the soldiers had to be innovative kasi they were crossing an open field. Doon nila tinayo itong trench na ito. So they basically put together sandbags, pati yung mga nasira ng pinto, bakal o kung ano man na mahahanap nila para maitayo yung trench na yon. At doon sila dumadaan para kahit papaano meron silang protection, no? Na hindi sila open target. But you would see around that trench, hindi lang yung mga sandbags, hindi lang yung mga bakal na sinet up nila. You'd also, this one is the most detailed drawing of all the drawings. Kasi I also wanted to situate the trench within the community na by this time, wasak na. Kaya you can see in the background yung ruins na ng mga bahay. But also at the same time, sa foreground, you'd see again, weed, grass, vines beginning to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I remember when Lan sent me that photo sa messenger, talagang hindi na ako nakahinga, parang nakita mo to? Nakita mo yung maliliit na detalye? So and it revived a lot of things, nung pagpunta ko doon to do my research. I had to walk around the city to see what really happened and took place, and I had to follow, like the officers would tell me this is what happened here and there. I had to actually go to that place to see how they did battle with the jihadis. Yeah.
At saka mapapansin mo dito, Joel, siksik na siksik itong particular drawing na to. Kasi by this time, ang nararamdaman ko na dun sa pag binabasa ko, by the way, I kept reading the book every time I go to UP, uupo lang ako under the trees doon, and I would read the book and then I would draw. Ang nararamdaman ko dito yung intensity ng close quarters combat. And that's why punong-puno itong particular drawing na to, punong-puno ng detail, because that was the feeling that I was getting, no? And So hindi lang yung, sabi ko nga dun sa introductory note dun sa catalog, it's not just the big canvas of war, pero ang dami talagang detalye. Hindi lang ng gera, kung hindi ng humanitarian consequences of the war, which is why I drew the trench within the context of the civilian community.
We'll talk of the humanitarian consequences later pag nakita natin yung iba pang mga artworks. Pero ang ano nito, no, hindi siya yung classical guerrilla warfare. This is an urban warfare in the
Yes.
city.
The only thing that happened before this was in Zamboanga, but Zamboanga is much smaller. You were just talking about one neighborhood, by the sea. Again, also a coastal village, but this was basically an entire city or half the city. But I'm saying entire city because talagang the entire old city of Dansalan was affected.
So,
Tsaka
okay.
natutuwa ako, Joel, that the former ground commander, si General Pamona, chose this particular excerpt. Kasi parang turning point din ito sa kanila.
Oo, kasi nahihirapan yung sundalo na at
Terms of
that time.
tactics, no?
Infantry to, oo. Nahihirapan na nung pumasok na siya, kailangan ng ayusin yung infantry, kailangan ng ayusin yung formation nila, yung maneuvers nila. Kaya siguro sa mga bandang August na yon, nagkaroon ng mga changes na doon na nila na-feel na they were moving. So how long was that? May, June, July, 2 months. So for 2 months, they were still kind of like struggling, trying to feel their way around. And it was only around August, early August, where they felt, okay, I think we're moving now, we're getting somewhere.
And that was the time that they built the trench, and the trench became a memorial, some sort of a memorial.
Yeah.
It stayed on the ground long after the battle.
May planong ba sa reconstruction ng Marawi to keep these trenches and ano?
I really don't know. Madali lang kasi rin siyang sirain kung tutuusin mo. I mean, if you're going to have to rebuild the entire place, that might have to go. But before, even while the rehabilitation talks were ongoing with the task force, the city actually turned out to be something like a living museum. Kasi naglagay na sila ng markers sa mga lugar na nagkaroon nga ng mga key battles. Like yun, sa Batumos, makikita mo may marker. Kung saan napatay si Hapilon, may marker na doon. Sa Dansalan, may marker na doon. So parang naging living museum siya. But now that they're, paving the way for a bigger place, a new reconstruction, I don't know what happened to those markers.
So, kung meron kasing ground operations, no? I'm sure tapos meron tayong mga binabanggit na elite. Yung susunod na work kasi, actually ako ito yung paborito ko yung snipers. napaka cinematic. Parang kumbaga sa pelikula POV yung shot. So,
nag-deviate ako dito. Nag-deviate ako dito, pero mamaya pwede nating pag-usapan pagkatapos natin ipakita.
Yeah.
We'll ask Chris to read the excerpt as we show the artwork of Lan interpreting the sniper's hole. Let's have it.
From the prism of the sniper's hole, the spotter behind the scope, Golf 3 enlarged his bearings as the overseer of the battle, because it was, in his view, the eyes that could see everything and hear everything. He said he was the eyes and ears of the battle, the maligno striking the bad guys. He was on the balcony near the scene, where on the ground the assault teams fought for every inch of space in an unfamiliar and labyrinthine city. In Marawi, the military had come upon the black-clad jihadis that dictated the rhythm of the fighting in their own enclave. Marawi was not a one-dimensional war. The sniper's hole could zoom in and out, but it couldn't possibly see every single little thing that took place in the main battle area. A battlefield was the ground for collective forces, and it became an ugly place where you see, you hear, everywhere, the screams and the pain, the fear and the death.
Oh, okay. Sige. Lan, you
Mabigat ito.
said you deviated.
So,
Ano,
Lan, ikaw na mag-explain kung bakit yun ang pinili mo, ha?
ano ang license na ginamit dito?
Kasi again, reading the story, the narrative that Chris wrote, ang una mong may imagine battle na street by street, house by house, and that the troops on the ground were having such a difficult time making a breakthrough. So meron na nung trench. But the story of the snipers, actually napaka-importante nun kasi that was the support that the troops on the ground also needed. I could have drawn a person, the sniper himself, except that hindi kasi ako marunong mag-drawing ng tao. Kaya naghanap ako ng ibang idodrawing. But kidding aside, I really wanted to capture ano ba ang nakikita ng sniper mula doon sa kanyang pwesto. Gagawa siya ng maliit na butas doon sa pader ng isang bahay na inoccupy nila. Siyempre maliit lang yun para hindi makita ng mga kalaban. And through that hole, ang nakikita naman niya hindi yung mga sundalo eh. Ang nakikita niya, again, is the community of Marawi. So, I tried to combine those two images and those two feelings na and the sniper's role compared to troops on the ground. Yung troops on the ground, may mga kasama ka, di ba? May squad ka. A sniper's job is very lonely. And you're in the dark. So I tried to show ano ang tinitingnan niya through, not just through that hole, but through his sniper scope. And you can see in this drawing saan nakatutok yung sniper scope, no? Hindi naman nakatutok sa mga kaaway yung sniper scope. Makikita mo yung sniper scope. What's in the middle of that scope, na ang nasa crosshairs is actually the city that the citizens of Marawi built. And you would see the Grand Mosque here. If you look at the details of this drawing, and by the way, these drawings are very small, ha? The space is only 6 inches by 9 inches. So yung mga detalye na yan were drawn very, very, maliliit yan pag nakita nyo yung actual drawing.
Meticulous.
Makikita nyo dyan yung Grand Mosque in flames, so may mga usok pa yan. But really, it's the layout of the community as seen by the sniper from his scope.
Yung isang striking kasi sa akin dyan, yung POV, yung point of view ng sniper. Pero at the back, overlooking the city is a mosque.
Yes, that's the Grand Mosque.
Yung conflict ng violence and yung faith on the other side, tapos nasa gitna yung lungsod na binabanatan during the time. It's really striking. Grace,
Tsaka ano yan, Joel? Dito nag-deviate ako, kailangan ko magpaalam kay Chris at saka kay Yasmin na publisher. Kasi sabi nila, walang color black and white lang lahat, kaya nga pen and ink. Pero sabi ko, hindi, I have to use watercolor in this particular drawing.
Pero okay na rin kasi nung ginawa niya yan, nagkaroon na kami ng declick na eto na yung cover. Kasi nagdedebate pa kami kung anong gagamitin namin sa cover. You know, I mean, well, you see the other artwork, so it's like it was really hard for us to choose which one we would use for the cover. But when Lan did this and she colored it, eto na yon. Yan.
Chris, yung syempre yung mas aggressive na operation sa ground. Paano yung interaction nito tsaka yung mga snipers? Gaano kalaking papel yung ginampanan ng snipers?
Well, syempre importante rin. I mean, you have kasi sa battle na to, merong assaulters tsaka merong snipers. Pero syempre mas kukonti yung snipers kasi highly trained sila eh. Hindi naman lahat pwedeng maging magaling na sniper. Nung pumunta kasi ako sa lugar na to, this was already around August, and even before they took just before, a few days before they took the Grand Mosque. So we were in this one sniper hole. You know, it's really strange because in a way it was kind of, the room, it was kind of cozy. I mean, nag-inuman pa kami ng tsaa, nakipagkwentuhan pa kami, tapos bigla na lang may sniper pupunta, tapos we'll have to cup our ears. And then, you know, we'll have to go and peep again to see what happened. And we were moving from one house to another, going down, going up. It was really like a maze before we could actually see the city. It was like having a balcony view of what was happening in the main battle area. But you know, it's really a small team. And Lan is right. It's a lonely job. I mean, you see them in movies. So it's pretty much the same, except that yung mga snipers natin, hindi sila well equipped. Hindi gaya ng mga iba na nandun yung computers, i-add na lang. Ito, meron pa silang kodigo sa wall. Meron pa silang mapa sa wall na gumagamit pa sila ng thread and pin para, you know, i-measure yung distances. So, hindi siya yung American sniper na pinapanood natin sa movie. Yeah. They were innovative too. They were quite innovative with what they had to do.
May malaking mosque dun sa background. Ilang mosque meron sa ano?
Madami. Dozens. Because it's not just a mosque for the community. There were also families that would have their private mosque. Oh. So every corner that you turn to, you would see a mosque. But the Grand Mosque was particularly known, well, because it's grand, it's big, and it also took about 10 years for it to be built, according to a professor I spoke to at MSU. And it was the community, the families that contributed to the building of that mosque. Pero sa battle, may isa pang mosque na talagang mas critical yung nangyari. So, yun, iter na yun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yung Bato Mosque.
You're referring to Bato Mosque?
Yes.
Okay. So, Chris, you'll read again the excerpt on Bato
yes.
Mosque, and
okay.
Tingnan natin ulit yung artwork.
So, stunning rin ito rin. Talagang iniisip pa namin nung umpisa baka ito yung cover, pero anyway. So, nangyari na yung sniper's hole. So, okay, let's start with the Bato Mosque.
The video.
The video.
Itong video, they show the location.
So, September 16, inside the Bato Mosque, Azrael took one platoon with him while another went to the Pink Building. They went in unencumbered, lobbing in tear gas with no resistance at all. From the Pink Building, a sniper saw an enemy through a gaping hole of a damaged wall. The enemy fell. Just then, a barrage of gunfire erupted, triggering a horde of militant fighters to come out from the stairs on the left side of the building. Para silang daga. They were like rats. The sniper shot had signaled to the enemies that the soldiers were there. The enemy fighters creeping out of the basement instantly threw pipe bombs at the platoon. In the Pink Building, immediately wounding the troops, including the platoon leader, who suffered shrapnel wounds in his right leg. Azrael and his remaining platoon were left stranded inside the mosque. Tayo na lang dito. Kaya ba natin? This was the most harrowing incident, I think, of all the stories that I've heard among the soldiers. Yeah, ito yung pinaka-ano.
Ano yung distansya nung Bato Mosque at saka nung Pink?
Malapit lang. Side by side lang talaga siya. And in fact, what's so interesting was yung binigay ko kay Lan yung pictures, lahat frontal pictures ng Bato Mosque. So kala ko, yun ang i-drawing niya. Yung frontal, yung facade ng mosque. Pero ang ginawa niyang drawing, yung Pink Building tsaka yung minaret ng Bato Mosque. And what she did was she really was very detailed with all the bullet holes. And then it just occurred to me, ganun katindi yung battle doon.
Yeah.
Yung nangyari doon. Talagang, and they had to take it twice. They had to do it twice to be able to take it. Nung first time, kala nila, walang problema to, wala silang nakikita. Yung kunento ko kanina, when they shot someone, it signal na nga to the enemies that the soldiers were there. Kaya, nag-erupt na. Naging matindi na talaga. So, kukonti na lang ang natirang sundalo sa loob ng Bato Mosque na talagang open na siya. They were just hiding in one little corner. And all, guns were fired at them and they were trying to cover themselves. And they really didn't think they would come out of it alive. There were armored personnel carrier that would come and supposedly pick them up, pero natatamaan rin yung armored personnel carrier, so babalik sila. Yung mga sundalo sa loob, parang, we missed it. Paano na mangyayari sa atin? And they came out of it, they came out of it alive eventually, just by waiting for nighttime for them to come out to leave the Bato Mosque. But then, because they didn't really take it, they had to plan another, they had to do another plan to take it a week after. And something interesting happened there, because that was when Father Chito, who was the priest of the parish priest of St. Mary's Church there, was held hostage. Nandun sila lahat sa baba. All the rebels were there below, including Omar. Hindi nila alam yon at that time.
Nangyari ito towards yung malapit na ring matapos yung kaya ganun
Mid-September na.
Yeah.
Diba kasi, like I said earlier, nung bandang August, nagmo-move na sila, ang dami na nilang nakukuha. Tatlong sectors yan eh. So you have the Marines, you have the Light Reaction Regiment and the Special Forces, and then you have the Scout Rangers. So para silang nag-uunahan kung sino makakadating sa lake at kung sino makakatrap sa leaders kay Hapilon at kay Omar Kaya.
So nitong dinodrawing ko tong Bato Mosque, kunikwento nga ni Chris na hindi naman to yung reference picture na binigay niya. I actually had to read, back-read stories of the Bato Mosque sa mga news accounts. And kaya ko din drawing tong Bato Mosque because nga dito maraming pinostage. And that's why I felt I needed to capture it. Pero kung mapapansin nyo lahat ng drawing, walang mga tao, di ba? Except for later makikita natin dun sa Grand Mosque. Pero nung dinodrawing ko tong Bato Mosque, ang una kong dinrawing yung minaret. I was looking closely at it. Dito ko nakita, pagka pala binabarel, may pattern palang nakikreate. Because syempre, I could then imagine in my head when the soldiers were shooting at something, they were holding their powerful guns. Pag kinalabit nila yung gatilyo nun, yung bala nun, parang chak di ba? So dito, nasusundan ko na yung, in my head, I was playing the battle. Tapos nasusundan ko kung saan tumatama yung mga bala. At kung paano nawawasak yung, it's the Grand Mosque. It's a structure, but it actually represents the life in Marawi kasi they're very, very grounded in their religion, in their culture, no? Tapos I had to draw the pink building beside the Grand Mosque kasi may account sa book na to be able to get to the Bato Mosque, they had to get through the pink building. So parang naging paraan nila yung pink building to get into Bato Mosque. But if you'll notice the perspective here, pataas, di ba? Because syempre pag facade lang, I also wanted to see how destroyed the pink building was from inside. So I tried to draw the inside of the pink building by looking up. No? So makikita niyo yung destruction ng pink building. And pink building is a foundation, Marawi
It's a commercial
Foundation.
building, naging partly school, may dormitory. Pero nung dati daw, it was a movie house, I was told. Yeah.
So, na natin, paano nag-operate yung mga sundalo, more or less, paano yung mga maniobra, nasaan yung mga jihadists. Pero wala pa tayong narinig tungkol dun sa mamamayan na affected. So as we go, except yung maraming hostages dito sa particular Batom Mosque. So at this point, let's hear Johania Yusuf, a resident of Marawi, to read an excerpt and along with Lan's rendition of the finish line, the White Mosque.
The whitewashed mosque is a simple square structure with an equally simple dome in the middle, quite unlike the other extravagant mosque of towering minarets. This one was minimalist and its fading color merged with the grayness of the lake. Jackal sent two of his teams to get into the small building. They saw a rebel running past fleetingly. The corporal in the first team fired shots and threw two grenades down to the ground floor. They heard cries after the explosion. They heard terrified children. They heard men shouting Allahu Akbar. And just too soon, an improvised grenade was hurled their way from below. The corporal didn't jump back or kick it away from him. In fact, he moved as if to catch the grenade. It would take 5 days before the Marines would take hold of the White Mosque. A few days later, on October 4th, Terend organized a daring escape of hostages. The rendezvous point was the White Mosque, which was one of the city's oldest.
All right.
Madaming interesting stories
Joel
about
si Johania is also a teacher and a peace advocate.
Okay.
And anchor din siya sa DXSA sa Marawi, yung Radyo Pilipinas.
Marawi.
Chris, you were about to say something?
No, I forgot.
Sige. Habang iniisip mo, may mga ilang questions. Unahin natin yung kay Byron Bokar. The Battle of Marawi has often been called the Siege of Marawi. Siege warfare is an ancient form of warfare involving the assaulting forces and the defending troops. Do you think the term is an accurate description of the battle? If so, who was the besieger and who was the besieged? Or was the battle more like the Battle of Stalingrad in
No.
World War II?
It's more like the Battle of Thermopylae. So if in case it's the Battle of Thermopylae was written in Herodotus, but each time I talk to people about this, the first reaction is, 300, the movie 300, which I've never seen. So, basically you had the superior force, the military, and you had the rebels that knew the place and knew how to hide and knew what to do, knew how to take it, knew how to take control of it. And the superior force could not in any way penetrate it at the beginning. So they had to find a way in. And so it's like the Battle of Thermopylae. But in the Battle of Thermopylae, a snitch from the Spartans told the Persians how to find a way in. Dito, hindi. Pero interesting yung kwento na hindi ko sasabihin ngayon.
Again, read the book. It sells at a discounted price until October 30.
Pero interesting talaga. It's very interesting because it has to do with the friendship of a soldier and a police and a Christian soldier and a Muslim police and a Christian soldier who converted to Islam. So it's a nice background ng storya. So nahanap nila, silang dalawa nakahanap ng butas para makapasok sa loob. Walang snitch. Pero ganun yung principle. Yeah.
Meron tayong...
So yes, in a way, at the start, it was like a siege, diba? At the beginning, yeah.
Meron tayo nasa audience na isang high school student, senior high school student from Limay. Meron siyang tanong kay Chris pero isi-segue ko rin sa tanong kay Lan. No?
Okay.
I am Clarence Salvador, student from Limay Senior High School and a writer of The Harbinger, the official student publication. Are there any hardships you encountered while writing the book, given the horrible events that happened in the battle? Tapos yung karugtong nun siguro kailan, reflecting on what you've read, reflecting on the text, ano yung hirap? Kasi meron ding nagtanong, meron isang comment na, I forgot, I'll look at it later. Impressive yung pagdodraw based on your feelings and your readings. No? So paano to? Paano ginagawa yung ganitong magic? Chris.
Ang unang magic. Nung inumpisahan ko yung libro, I was really very, very focused on doing it. So for 1.5 years, I did nothing but interview the officers. So I interviewed basically a total of 80 people. That's a combination of officers, some rebels, some residents, but a majority were officers and were commanders. And even after that, nabitin pa nga ako, parang gusto pang kausapin yung mga corporals, mga privates. Pero kung gagawin ko yun, that's going to take another 5 years. So I was just really living a very minimalist lifestyle at that time. It's all interviews. When I get home, I'd read my notes, so I'd know what to ask again. I'd follow through with every interviews, not just once, twice, 3 times. If there were things I couldn't understand, I would go to Marawi to double check if they were telling me, giving me the right description of their stories. Siguro ang highlight ko lang during those 1.5 years was to go to classical concerts sa UP Abelardo Hall. Yun lang. So parang nangyayari yon sa utak ko sa gabi, nasusulat na eh. Nandun na siya. You know, it's already moving. And in fact, it came to a point where I felt like I was writing a novel kasi interesting yung mga characters, yung mga movement ng mga characters where one officer started here and he ended up here. You know, I like the combination and the circumstances that they had to live through during the battle, but that's another long story. So yun, I think it's just that. Kung if you say nahirapan, hindi naman. Ang siguro mahirapan lang ako, it's more of the follow-up. But I actually felt like I was living it. Maybe she wanted to know if I was undergoing some kind of PT, you know, some kind of trauma or anything like that, like the soldiers did. No, I didn't. But I think some officers did without showing it to me. And I think the main reason why they felt compelled to tell their story was because they had to unburden themselves. And they didn't want to do it na naka-tape ka, naka-record ka. Gusto lang nila na nagkukwento sila.
Oo. Lan, yung tanong ko, yung comment pala nang galing kay Soc Reyes. No? Amazing, Lan, how can you interpret the battle using your feelings and imagination? How did you do that?
Hindi ko alam kung paano sasagutin eh. Basta walang masyadong, there was nothing mysterious about the process, at least for me. Basta sa akin lang, I read the book, and then I decided to draw an interpretation of those parts of the book that left an impression on me. Okay. And by impression, I meant ano yung pakiramdam ko, and that's what I tried to capture in the drawings. Pero kung mapapansin niyo, walang tao mostly in the drawings because Marawi was a ghost town by this time. Or kung meron ng mga tao, they were either hostages or they fled, naging IDPs na sila. And it was really just and to me, the collection of drawings is really a statement on how Marawi was destroyed. Nung nagtatrabaho ako sa Central Mindanao, when I was the country director of Oxfam, we ran humanitarian programs in Central Mindanao na ano rin, affected by the all-out war nung panahon pa ni ERAP. And I usually would go through Marawi in, traveling across Mindanao. And I remember it to be such a beautiful city by the lake.
Yes.
And then to see how it was completely destroyed by this battle. And 4 years since the battle, ganun pa rin. In fact, the Marawi citizens want the rehabilitation of Marawi as an important electoral agenda. And tama sila doon. Because rebuilding Marawi doesn't just mean rebuilding the structures. It represents rebuilding their lives, recovering from the horror and trauma of that 5-month-long battle.
Mm. Now, we have 3 more artworks to show na walang kasamang excerpt, no? So pag-usapan natin ito pagkatapos nating mapanood, meron pa pong 3 nalalabing artworks na gusto naming ipakita. Ang Butig, Curtain of Tea Bags, and the Grand Mosque. Ano ang kwento nitong 3 artworks? Yung Butig, yung Grand Mosque, tapos lalo na sa akin, ang particular na interest ko talaga dito yung tea bag curtain.
Sige.
Sige.
Oo, yung Butig, that's the town after Marawi, no? Nasa Lanao del Sur na ba yan? South of Marawi. But the leaders of the Maute brothers were from Butig. At dyan sila unang nagtayo ng mga kampo nila, dyan sila unang nag-recruit ng kanilang mga jihadis. And from the river, they could easily cross to Marawi. But I wanted to draw, I drew that river, una to show na, although we probably have this idea na ang Butig ay sentro ng terrorism, actually, sentro din siya ng buhay ng mga taga Mindanao, particularly from that particular area. And actually, Butig is such a poor place. So yung combination siguro ng poverty, ng nararamdaman nilang injustice, but also the prejudice, the discrimination that our Muslim brothers and sisters feel. At saka dito, dun sa Butig, parang napaka-isolated na lugar. Hiwalay na it's a very different illustration compared to the battle scenes in Marawi. Because I also wanted to show that there's a different aspect to this. And that yung river na yan, which flows between the two locations, is probably the connection also, not just of the trauma from the battle, but if ever Marawi and Mindanao as a whole, and yung sugat sa Mindanao ay sugat ng buong Pilipinas. Very often, yung mga nandito sa Maynila, sinasabi natin, ay, problema lang yan sa Muslim Mindanao. Hindi natin problema yan. But actually, that's wrong. Because had we not been able to, actually, yung spread ng violent extremism did not happen just, over the past 4 years. It's been there for a long, long time. And because we often ignore it. At saka sometimes the prejudice nga, the discrimination that still is very prevalent. Mitya din yan ng conflict at saka kaya na-attract yung marami dun sa violent extremism. So yun yung booting. But if you notice dun sa video, nagpapan siya towards that very dark spot in the forest, it's because yun nga, on the surface you find diversity, variety of plants, but actually hidden behind in the shadows are other things that we shouldn't be afraid of. In fact, we should be brave enough to uncover and understand. Yan yung butig. And then the Grand Mosque is actually the link between the first edition and itong second edition, kasi yung Grand Mosque ang book cover ng first edition. And so I wanted to draw it as the link. But also because the Grand Mosque, which was shown dun sa sniper's hole, so this is a close-up, but a very extreme close-up. So it's just the minaret and the soldier. Dito lang sa illustration na to may tao. And if you notice, the soldier is also in silhouette, no? Again, because hindi man ako marunong mag-drawing ng tao, kaya silhouette na lang siya. But it's the details of the tower. And then the curtain of tea bags, this is an interesting chapter in the book. Yung curtain of tea bags nasa dulo yan. It's after you've read all of the chapters. Itong curtain of tea bags ay isang room dun sa isang bahay na tinatawag na TCP, Tactical Command Post. Tama ba yon, Chris? Nung isa sa mga field commanders, I don't know the technical term, but isa siya dun sa mga nagko-command ng battle on the ground.
Company commanders.
Yeah, company commander pala ang tawag doon. But I was struck kasi nasa gitna siya ng gera. Pero nagtsatsaa siya at nagagawa niyang gumawa ng kurtina out of his tea bags. And to me, that felt like you're in the napaka-intense ng battle. You're in the middle of heat of the fighting. And to me, his attempt to make a curtain out of his tea bags was to me as parang a dimension of his humanity. Na it's such a mundane act. Yung paggawa, stringing his tea bags to make a curtain. But to me, ewan ko, ang lalim lang ng impact sa akin noon na tao pa rin siya.
I just also want to add yung drawing nila ng ginamit sa first cover ng first edition. It's actually from a photograph done by a photographer from Mindanao. His name is Bobby Lagsa. And when I first saw this photograph, nandun siya sa wall ng commanding general ng Philippine Army. Nandun lang siya sa wall. So doon ako na-impress sa photo niya. Nakuha niya yon after na the battle. It was already around November. So si Lan was thinking, of adding more drawings and she said, ito na lang gawin natin. So I had to ask, the photographer if he was okay with that. He was okay naman with it. Yeah.
Yung sinasabi nila na yung konteksto ng butig sa mahirap na lugar and diversity and all that, at saka yung pag-connect doon sa the humanity of the tea bags. Chris, nagre-reflect, how does this reflect doon sa mga interviews, doon sa mga ground personnel?
Let's start with Butig and what my impression was of that place when I got there. Talagang siya, it was basically like a ghost town. Pagdating mo doon, maliit lang yung municipal hall na kinuha ng mga rebels noon, ng mga Mauti brothers, pero na-retake ng mga sundalo at naging detachment na siya ng army. So yun, itong town hall na to, sa tapat noon, basketball court. And yung mga bahay surrounds that basketball court. At kung nagkakarido, parang yung basketball court, yung delineation, di ba? Kung mag-aaway sila. Pero I mean, it really felt miserable when I was there. I mean, siguro nung pagbalik ko na lang doon na nakita ko na may konting commerce. But before that, may ibang bahay na sira-sira, wala nang tao, kukonti lang yung nabebenta sa tindahan. Pero nung pagbalik ko, at least man lang may nagbebenta na ng tinapay, ng konting barbecue. Ano man tawag doon? Yung isaw? Isaw ba tawag?
Isaw.
Yun. So meron ng ganon. Pero paglabas mo sa town hall na yon, you just take a long drive to the meadow, iba na. Ang ganda na ng lugar. You know? And yun yung na-capture ni Lan. Pero sa ganda nitong lugar na to, nandun yung kampo ng mga rebels. Nakita ko pa yung dati nilang kampo na ngayon ni-reconstruct ng mga sundalo na ang ganda nga ng pagkagawa. Pero nung dati, nung sira-sira na yung barracks nila, nandun pa yung mga graffiti nila. At nung kunento sa akin ng isang jihadi, nandun sila natulog, doon nung nagtitraining sila, doon lang. So kampo siya in the sense na not in the way we have camps, military camps. It's really more like little encampments, you know. Tents lang or mga sako-sako na pinagtatay together. Pero ang maganda kasi sa lugar na yon, ang na-realize ko sa lahat ng mga rebel camps, lagi silang malapit sa tubig. Importante kasi yung tubig. At yung river doon talagang it was flowing with water. And also over that mountain range is already Maguindanao. And that's where you have Camp Abubakar. So Butig was where they called it Camp Bushra. The MILF called it Camp Bushra. Pero nag-awa yung MILF tsaka yung Mauti brothers. Kasi yung mga Mauti brothers nagtayo sila ng flag, ng black flag, na ayaw ng MILF kasi nga they were still negotiating with the government for a peace agreement. And it would look bad, di ba? Why are you raising the ISIS flag and here we are talking to the government? So nagkaroon sila ng away, tapos nag-retreat late. Ang tigas pa ng ulo ni Omar, ayaw niya umalis. Nag-stay talaga siya doon for 1 month. Yung brother niya, si Abdullah, who was more known to be the religious figure, left and went to one of the hamlets. And pumunta ako doon sa hamlet na yon kasi nandun yung bahay ng auntie niya. Na simpleng bahay lang . Tapos sabi ko, so anong ginawa nila? Saan sila nagtayo? Dito lang sa harap. Tapos tinignan ko yung harap. Wala. Talagang barren. Tapos mga cassava stalks lang. Tapos sabi ko, oh my gosh. A small place like this can grow into a rebellion. You know? And you start wondering how, why? And then it goes back to what kind of a town Butig is, you know. It's a small town. It's actually the home place of the mother of the Mauti brothers. It's more of the mother, not the father. And so that's their like their bailiwick, but sanay sila sa lugar na yon. Pero poor nga siya. So kung nandun ka, you know, you graduate from abroad, you studied abroad, you went to Jordan, you went to Egypt, you come back and you know you're both good looking, crush ng bayan pa nga si Omar nung dati ang tawag sa kanya. And you know, you have kids there who can't even go to school, who don't know what's happening outside their little village. You'll be drawn to them. You really will be drawn to them. You know, and even if you're not a poor kid there, even if you're studying in MSU and you're looking for your self-identity, it would be so easy to get drawn to these two young cutie guys, you know, who were talking about Islam and Wahhabism and all that, which I think not every Muslim understands. I don't think they even know what happened in Mosul or in Raqqa. You know, I don't think they know that history. Pero you have two homegrown kids, boys, men, talking about these things, and I can just imagine how very striking it was for people there in Marawi.
May tanong si Denise Erica Senyeres. And I think it's about what has been mentioned earlier in the program. I'm curious about Raven and what he must have felt during the battle. Are you still in touch, or did may further interaction pa ba, communication dun sa mga sources, and how are they are coping now?
Not all. Some of them would because some of them were upset with me. So, but a few, would stay in touch. Yung story ni Raven was towards the end na, and in fact, it happened on November 19, and it's something that I can't really describe here in details. But sa bandang huli kasi, Raven was with the Special Forces and sumabay siya with the Light Reaction Regiment, with the LRR, the elite na trained with sa close combat, and they were negotiating for the release of the remaining rebels, and nagkalito-lito, nagkaroon ng miscommunication, and well, that's where eventually the site where they were staying was bombed. So I think Raven took it hard after a while, but I think he was also probably proud that he did what he could, to try to negotiate the surrender of the remaining jihadis. Yeah.
We have a comment from Aurora Imanaga. This exchange, scene by scene discussion with the author, the excerpt, the recordings, the artist, the cartographer, is unique and brings a near life experience. Congratulations daw.
Thank you.
Maraming
Karina rin
salamat.
also, maganda rin yung sinabi ni Karina. Thank you for this wonderful launch, weaving together video footage, art, and readings to tell the story of the Battle of Marawi. Remarkable reinvention of a book launch. Congrats to us.
Oo nga, ngayon lang.
Thank you.
Ngayon lang din ako naka-experience ng ganito. Anyway, saan daw mabibili yung book?
Kasi ngayon it's on sale starting today dahil nga launch date, tapos hanggang October 30 on sale siya. Pwedeng pumunta sa Facebook page ng The Battle of Marawi. Nandun na yung order forms. Madali lang. Yeah, kung may problema, messenger na lang sa akin. Sa Facebook. Oo.
Sa Facebook. Lan yung artworks, paano ito? May catalog ba? May
Oo.
Oo.
Yung mga artwork, so after the launch, i-upload namin yung art catalog, at saka there's also virtual exhibit, which will parang mas makikita ninyo yung details ng virtual exhibit, nung each drawing in the virtual exhibit. I-upload namin right after the launch.
Yeah.
Gusto ko lang banggitin, this is the artworks are being auctioned. It's not part of the Asian Center launch, but it's a personal effort on my part. The artworks, the drawings are being auctioned to support the livelihood project of the women of Marawi through the Green Hijab organization, at saka to also support Baigani. Baigani is an organization that I and a few other feminists set up nung simula nung tokhang, nung war against drugs. And Baigani supports the widows and orphans of the drug war. Both groups of women, the women of Marawi and the widows of the drug war, have gone through the horrors and trauma of wars, two different wars. One, the war in Marawi was due to the spread of violent extremism. The war against drugs, which actually targets the poor, is a result of extreme prejudice against the poor. So all of the sale, the proceeds from the art auction will go to these two groups of women.
So please, those in the house, avail yourself of a copy of the book and makibid na po sa ating online auction.
Meron
There's,
yatang
Actually, lahat sila
visual
lahat sila nandun. Yung catalog, yung virtual exhibit, yung order form, nandun lahat sa Facebook page ng
Sa
The
Facebook
Battle of
page.
Marawi. Oo, nod lahat. So madali lang.
Meron pang mga ilang tanong dito.
Okay.
From Corinne Canlas, did the Maranaos or certain portions of it support the rebels? And how did this affect their relationship and families post-war?
Oh, that's going to be a really difficult question to ask because you're going to have to ask each and every family. But Marawi is known, I mean, you have families there. How do I say this? Almost every house has, not just in Marawi, but in Mindanao, almost every house has a gun. Violence has become a very normal, Rido has become a very normal thing in the last 30, 40, 50 years, you know, of the Mindanao story. So when you're there, depende lang sa family kung ano yung alliances mo, kung what's good for you, what's not good for you. A lot of people decide right there and then. Pero ang big change kasi nito was from the start sa 1970s, nung nag-start yung MNLF, nag-gather force, nag-combine ng forces, yung mga religious, political, and even all the ethnic groups, Maranao, Tausug, Maguindanao, into one to secede from the Philippines. Clear-cut yung agenda nila, which is separatism. But nag-breakaway, ang dami ng breakaway over time, you know. And so ngayon, iba-iba rin, splinters rin yung mga grupo. At yung pamilya rin, iba-iba sila. And kuminsan nag-overlap. Kaya depende. So you can't really say, just because I'm here, I'm ideologically MILF or I'm ideologically pro-Al-Qaeda and not IS, you stick to that. It's not there. It depends on your links to your family links, your clans. I think it's the clans that's more pervasive. Mas alam nila yon kung ano. Doon sila magde-decide kung paano to protect their clan.
Okay. Again from Byron Bocar. It has been said that there was use of excessive force on the side of the military, including the use of heavy weapons and aerial bombings, which is claimed to have accounted for the destruction of the old city and high casualties on both sides. What was initially thought would be a surgical operation turned out to be long-drawn battle of attrition. It even involved so-called friendly fire, casualties among the soldiers from the aerial bombardment. Was there really excessive force used by the military?
I think it's a war. How do you restrain it? I mean, how do you restrain a battle? How do you restrain fighting in that kind of situation when you're trying to take a city or retake a city? I think from the start, dahil nga hindi pa sila sigurado kung anong gagawin, they didn't quite know how to deal with it. And I think a lot of the things were done by default. So for example, when the LRR was able to cross Bangolo Bridge and they were able to take the first building after the bridge, past the bridge, they were told to come back because the seniors were quite frightened na mauubos sila. You cannot have your LRRs killed, right? I mean, this is like the most elite, trained unit of the armed forces. Sila yung spare force mo na hindi mo pwede lang itapon na ganon. So, nung pinabalik na sila, ang naging default mode was to have an airstrike. Kasi nga, if you're not used to it, I'm not a strategist, and it's not really I feel uncomfortable when I have to answer these questions because I'm not an officer. I just get this from what they tell me. When you're in a situation like that, you just make do with what you have. And you use your superior force. Why not? You have your superior force. I mean, if your men are being killed and, if the city is being taken over by rebels, what do? You do what you can to retake it. So nagkakaroon din sila ng debate. Alam ko nagkaroon din sila ng debate ng iba. Gusto surgical na, bilisan na. Meron pa nga silang idea na, yung mga iba sinabi masyado namang Hollywood yan. Na it's too late na for us to do this. Yung talagang papasok sila na parang blitzkrieg, lahat ng mga armored personnel. Pero again, there was also an element of them not knowing what were in the houses. So how can they do that? So they decided yun, naging attrition na lang talaga. Face by face, house by house, face by face, until they reached the lake. It's only in the end when I realized that that maneuver was kind of, I thought it was brilliant. You know, the way all three sectors went there na parang sport team run yun eh. Sinong mauuna sa kanila. So sinong pinakamabilis to reach the lake. Yun ang naging attrition. Pero along the way, nag-innovate na sila. Each unit had to innovate because they were not familiar with the tactics of the rebels. They had to learn right there and then. So in a situation like that, you really just do what you can. You know, if you have the best machine guns, if you have the planes, then you use it.
Mm-mm. Thank you. Tinatanong ni Edbert Delizeo from Lyceum, what is your biggest motivation in publishing this book that narrates one of the most historical events of the armed forces fighting for peace?
Motivation?
Was there any reason? What was
well, first of all, I'm a journalist. I'm a writer, so I think that's a big enough motivation. But I was there. I was there in August, and I was toying with the idea of sige, siguro I'll write a book about this. But it was only after the battle, the siege, that I decided to just sit down with a few commanders and say, tell me what really happened, because nobody knew what happened inside. Diba? It was off limits. The main battle area was off limits to everybody, even to the press. So kung makakapasok man lang, sandali lang, tapos lalabas ka, pero you're not allowed to be there. You were not allowed to be embedded with the troops. So after that, that's when I talked to a few commanders, and I just said, so let's just have lunch and just tell me what really happened. And isang kwento lang ng isang officer kung paano nila, yung first day pa lang ng pagkuha when they were trying to get Hapilon in the house, in the hideout, I said, okay, this is it. I'll do it. I'll do the book. Yeah.
Meron daw bang title appropriate drawing in every chapter? Tanong ni Ms. Aurora Imanaga.
Hindi kinaya.
Hindi hinaya.
Oo nga, kasi
We only have 9.
And Lan was working kasi at that time, and she was really very busy. You know, she's a superwoman. So it was kind of, I mean, yung drawing time lang niya sa weekend, tapos nanonood pa yata siya ng Korean movies, K-drama, while doing the drawing. So, you know, sa kanya parang naging therapy to. So sa akin lang, parang, okay, Lan, this is what I have. It's up to you. And I let her be, you know, just use your instinct, whatever you feel about this, your creative ideas, I leave it all to you. And tuwing natatapos siya, papadala niya sa akin sa messenger, and hindi na naman ako makakatulog, you know. Kasi maganda na eh.
Nung una yun ang balak ko, one drawing per chapter. Nung very sketchy lang yung, parang, you know, there's a style of drawing na quick lang, di ba? Pero yung anak ko, yun yung totoong artist. And by the way, gusto ko lang sabihin, wala akong art education of any sort. In fact, itong pen and ink drawings in the book, these are my first pen and ink drawings. Yung anak ko na totoong artist, yun ang nag-a-advise sa akin. Pangit yung ginawa mo yan, palitan mo yan. So when I got more and more immersed na dun sa story, and the drawings became more and more detailed, hindi ko na kinaya yung bawat chapter. Tapos sabi nga ni Chris, I was also doing this on the side. I still had my full-time work with Oxfam, and in the middle of that, ito since last year, there was the pandemic response that I had to oversee. There was the coup in Myanmar. There were plenty of other disasters happening, which I had to also make sure we were responding. And towards the final leg na nitong book, Afghanistan pa happened. So the last two drawings, na hindi na umabot sa publication ng book are Dansalan and the Grand Mosque. Because I was making these drawings, yun nga, when Afghanistan and particularly Kabul was falling to the Taliban. So, but you can still get to see the artwork kasi mag-upload kami na virtual exhibit, and there's also a catalog. Even if you don't get the original drawing, we're also producing artists' prints for those who are interested.
Yes. So magkakaroon po ng artist print, and if you want to see more of the drawings, the virtual tour will be posted tomorrow, the day after the launch.
Baka pwede tonight.
Baka. So abangan nyo na lang. Chris, tanong pa rin ni Miss Aurora, may naging papel ba ang sultanato ng Lanao sa labanan sa Marawi?
The Sultanate?
The Sultanate of Lanao, yes.
As far as I know, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
as far as I
really
know.
extremism.
Yeah. I think once Dansalan, once that part of the city became a battle area, it was all in the hands of the military. Yeah.
Okay. Pwede daw bang manghingi? Can you sign autograph copies if you fill out the order form for the book? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to say it though. You have to you have to leave a note saying that you want an autograph copy.
Or message Chris in her Facebook page.
Ang dami pang questions dito. May mga ibang somebody said something about the AFP limited modern. It's hard to describe the tactics and that they went. It would take another hour, 2 hours even to just be discussing that, and Steve Rude has left, and congratulations again from Merlin Pausanos. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So any other questions?
From Dosa?
Nan, is there anything else you want to say? In the end, I really felt that it turned out well. The combination of Lan's work, kasi talagang kung bubuksan mo yung libro at makikita mo yung drawing, it's like going to a museum. It's like seeing a painting in a museum. You know how that feeling when you just sit in a museum and you look at the painting, it appeases you, it calms you, and that's what I thought was very important na i-counter sa storya nung battle. Oo. Tapos tsaka yung maps rin ni Joma na hindi nyo na kailangan pumunta ng Google.
Although sa editing na ginawa namin ni Rico, we were thinking, would we use Joma's maps or would we show Google Earth? In the end, we decided we would go with Google Earth kasi parang mas real yung feeling. And if you were watching the videos, you'd see the indicators. They actually locate the scenes of the battle, but they also show you where the artwork, which parang spatial, where in Marawi was that drawing drawn from? Siguro, maybe what I want to say is, syempre the book is the story of the battle, but because siguro I was interpreting it also from my experience as a humanitarian worker, no? And yun nga, nagbabad ako sa Central Mindanao ng mahabang panahon. So I was also trying to imbue each drawing, not just with the technicalities or the tactics of the battle, but if you're a resident of Marawi, what kind of destruction would you see? And I was hoping that through the drawings, that kind of feeling, and ano bang feeling yun? Largely sadness, sadness, a sense of loss. Yes, victory at the end of the battle, but loss of the city of Marawi and all that it signifies for the civilians of Marawi and the Maranao people.
It's overall it's a tragedy. Because I mean, like earlier I was talking about how it started in the 1970s. Nagkaroon na ng uprising sa Marawi, nagkaroon sa
Yeah.
Cotabato, nagkaroon sa Sulu. And in fact, lagi kong nire-reference yung nangyari sa Sulu, yung uprising doon, nasira rin yung Hulo. You know, na hanggang ngayon, hindi pa talaga nakaka-recover. I mean, in the sense na normal na sila, they're at peace. It's not like that. It's a place where rebels would go, you know, terrorists would go, extremists would go to
Yeah.
continue fighting. So yun lang. Tapos naabot na sa Marawi, you know, and that's the last place you would expect because I mean, that's where the university is, you know, it's landlocked, it's an Islamic capital. It's really not the place you'd expect that where something like this would happen.
Siguro the word to describe, if I may say so myself, to describe the drawings, is poignant. No?
Yes. Yeah, it's very poignant.
That was the feeling I was trying to capture.
And that's essentially why I felt, well, especially Yasi, the publisher of Pawikan Press, you know, nung pinakita ko sa kanya yung mga artwork nila, sabi niya, sige, gawin natin na to. Kasi iba eh, di ba? I mean, it would have been really easy for me to have put photographs of the battles of the soldiers, but I felt like all others that I've seen, news reports, other books, it had that. But Lan's work changes it, you know, makes you more introspective about why this really happened. And I mean, I've been criticized for doing it na bakit mga sundalo lang yung nangyari. Kasi nobody knew what was happening inside. Everybody knew what was happening outside. You read all the news reports. I mean, if I wanted to write what was happening outside, I could have just stayed in my little apartment and called all the news reports and put them together. But nobody knew what was really happening inside and who these men were and what lives they had, you know, and the relationships they had and how it affected their battle, their performance. So yun yung point ko. That's really what I wanted to focus on.
Yes.
Because even just by telling that story, it becomes historical, right? I mean, you would know in the bigger context of what this means in the saga from 1970s to the present.
Yes, and these are stories that need to be told time and again to remind us of these days and to remind us of the continuing struggle for peace in Mindanao and the continuing conflict. And and the artworks will, sabi nga nila, no, it will help us to introspect, to look, reflect on the artwork, to reflect on the lines and the shapes, because it gives us a better feeling of how it was. At we can only wish that now that we are facing a new election next year, na sana yung susunod na gobyerno magawa ng i-address yung root causes nitong mga conflict na to. Para unti-unti marating na natin yung kapayapaan sa Mindanao.
Oo.
Especially in Marawi.
True.
So as we close, we have 9 minutes left.
My messages, no, from mayroong recorded messages si Johannia at saka si
meron.
General Pamanag.
Pakinggan natin muna ang closing messages mula sa Mindanao nila Johannia Yusuf at ni Yusek Pamonag.
As I was reading the excerpts from this book that I read a while ago, it was like I was taken aback to the mosque that I was so familiar with because I was raised in Marawi City, and I am a true Dansalanan, and it feels sad, but somehow we're looking forward to a better Marawi after 4 years of the siege way back in 2017. We can only hope for the better Marawi City and better people of Marawi City. Thank you very much.
You know, hearing these stories remind me well of the sacrifices, the gallantry, and the heroism of our soldiers. I could vividly recall that on this day 4 years ago, we were slowly and carefully inching towards our final objective. every step, if I may describe, is a danger. And in a fast-paced battlefield situations, you need as a leader to make quick and hard decisions. But despite the odds and challenges, there was never a single moment during the grueling 5 months battle that I saw my men giving up amidst the orders of incessant attacks from the enemy. They were too bold and audacious. They, to me, were the most crucial factor of our victory. It has been an honor to become part of this historic battle. This is the bloodiest, the longest, and the most brutal battle I had seen in my 30 years of military service. The Battle of Marawi had been 5 months of continuous and unrelenting attacks to liberate the city from the clutches of the terrorist group. This is the story of victory, and I would want to tell over and over again to my children and my grandchildren the experiences we had encountered and the strategies we had employed are our noble contributions to the next generation.
Salamat po. And again, yes, before we close, pasasalamat po muli sa UP Asian Center, kay Dean Enelito Sevilla, Professor Tonet Raquisa, kay Janus Tulasco, kay Danay Pantano, salamat kay Jun Sepe at kay Jonathan Celiona ng ABS-CBN News para sa mga pictures. Maraming salamat sa dakila at sa aktivista. Ang libro po at ang mga artworks ay makikita ninyo sa Facebook page. And the publisher, Pawikan Press, is selling the books at a discounted price of 640 pesos only until October 30. So magpa-reserve na kayo ng mga libro, bumili na kayo. Lan is auctioning the artworks again to benefit the livelihood project of Green Hijab for the women of Marawi and by Gani, the family survivors of the EJK. There are starting bids for each work. You may join the auction by emailing Iti Garlan, another member of Baigani. She is in charge of the author. Send bids to iti.garlan@gmail.com. The bidding is now open until October 30. All information on the book, the art catalog, and virtual exhibit are at the Battle of Marawi Facebook page starting October 20 and also on the Facebook pages of Chris and Lan. Okay, so maraming salamat po. Anything else you want to say, Chris and Lan?
Ako, just a very simple thank you for coming. I know 2 hours are probably not enough to discuss every single thing, but maybe that's good. It will give you a chance to really more. I mean, if you read something and if you see an artwork, you know, it's also good to be reflecting on these things on your own. And we're just here to present what's there, what's available, and the most important thing is that it's part of history, so it cannot be forgotten.
Indeed, it is. Lan?
So every story of war is also a story of peace, and when I was drawing all the details of the destruction of the community and civilian life in Marawi, if you notice in the artworks, I would insert, yun nga, grass, weed, vines that grew in the cracks, no? In the most hostile environment. Because in my experience as a humanitarian worker, conflicts, especially battles, you know, they have a beginning and an end. That's the objective. But the work for peace happens even at the height of hostility. And they continue to grow despite the challenges. And so the grass, the weeds, the vines in the artwork are, to me, representations of hope for peace that rise from the rubble of war.
Thank you very much. And with that, maraming salamat po. Thank you for all those who came. Let's just not hope, but let's work for peace. I'm Joel Sarachal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Salamat
you.
po sa lahat.
Salamat.